and it's not new.
Okay, so, here we are. Okay, so we split this up into a few categories, and here are the categories. Coloring, so in reverse order. Here we go. Gluing, then reinforcing, then coloring. Okay, and so when gluing, we're talking about gluing 2 or more sheets of material together, paper. Okay, let's focus on paper for this talk, I think. For reinforcing, so kind of just like talking about one sheet of something, but anything from just sort of a glue type of reinforcement to getting a little bit more like you're saying large scale, like if you have a large origami, like you're going to have to reinforce it with something a little more solid. And then the last one is coloring, and kind of separate from gluing, like just how do you color paper? Yeah. Okay. So we should keep time. That's what I was proposing. So we can kind of make sure to touch on all of these, and I'm sure that we should leave time at the end also, so that because I'm sure you all will come up with like a lot of stuff that we did not even plan for or think about. So. Maybe kind of like a 10 minutes for each, 15 minutes for each. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so for gluing, I wanted to start out with methyl cellulose, and just right off the bat mention that Robert told me about carboxyl methyl cellulose about like two or 3 years ago. And it's kind of, I mean, it's, you know, it's more for us, really. But so for people, just real quickly, for people who have not done this before, methyl cellulose or carboxyl methyl cellulose, it's a type of someone correct me, it's like a plant-based glue. Like it's a organic molecule. Like so when you mix it in with water, and you have to make sure that it's a white powder. You mix it in with the water, and you have to let it like sit for a while because it's going to take a while to like really soak in. So you have to plan ahead for like about an hour or something to let it like soak in to disperse. And then you just sort of paint it on the paper, and from my experience, it is like one of the best feeling types of glue to work with because it feels like you're working with paper that is just has like extra muscle in the glue department of the paper. It feels like an extension of the paper itself. Like you're still playing with an organic. You're still touching something organic. You're not touching something that feels like a chemical. It's very nice to work with. Yeah. And then so. Did you I'm putting you on the spot, but did you want to like say anything about like what the difference between carboxyl methylcellulose and methylcellulose and maybe the microphone? So microphone, yeah.
We have another.
Oh.
Okay, so here's your chemistry lesson for the day. Paper, the dominant material in paper is cellulose, which is a chain of sugars. Anything that ends in ose is a sugar. Cellulose is a chain of sugars. It's so wood-based paper is mostly cellulose. Cotton is almost perfectly 100% cellulose. And cellulose is incredibly inert. It lasts for 1,000 years. But if you can chemically treat it to actually make it water soluble, and if you attach methyl groups. If you attach certain carbon atoms to it, it'll dissolve in water, and that is methyl cellulose. And if you attach somewhat different carbon atoms, it's carboxymethyl cellulose, actually, which is short for sodium carboxymethyl. There's a little sodium, like half of table salt in there. And the difference between the two, so both of them are water-soluble forms of cellulose, and and they're both sizing agents. So when you also hear about paper that has sizing in it, they often contain MC, CMC, or something like that. Elephant hide, and it's what gives paper crispness. So elephant hide has tons of that put in at the fabrication process. And I think they changed the recipe over the years, because 30 years ago, if you wet fold elephant hide or elephantenhout, your fingers would actually feel a little sticky, and then that was the sizing dissolving in the water. So when you're applying it, you are essentially just adding sizing to the paper, and that makes it crisp and improves the foldability. But you can also apply it while you're folding, and then you're sort of blurring the line between sizing and glue.
Yeah. There's a philosophical conversation that's going to come up later. Okay. That's fascinating. Thank you.
Who has other systems or mediums or techniques to glue two sheets of paper together besides methylcelluloid? Yes? In time. Did I say it correctly?
It's a very specific use, but for one workshop for beginners, I used paper which consisted of 2 sticky notes of different colors, glued using the glue strip, and it was to, I said that, okay, now it's done using glue and so on, but we need color change, so we want a sheet with 2 colors, and now we'll do a quick version. So it was a way to show to beginners that you can glue 2 sheets and get a sheet which is 2 colors on different sides. So of course it gives you a very small sheet, but it's quick and easily accessible.
2 post-its and
Yes.
put them together.
Yes.
But then it's only...
You probably did that, right?
It's good enough. If it's on
Yeah.
if it's on the other opposite sides, it keeps together. It's for a simple model, so you don't have to do anything complex. That was a joke, but for this case it works.
I'll be brief, but I want to add 2 more things. The technique of gluing 2 sheets of paper to improve the foldability, I think, was invented by Yoshizawa. It definitely was carried out by Yoshizawa, and it was called back coating. And other materials that have been used are starches. So wheat paste, pure cornstarch, and these are all also long chains of sugars like methylcellulose, CFC. And then there are other materials, which James can probably say more about, that are natural materials that play this same role. So there's a whole bunch of materials that can be used with this.
Well, if it's just about gluing 2 sheets together, independent of what they are, you can just use diluted PVA glue as well.
How do you use it?
I just take the glue, dilute it with a little water, and I apply it with a painter's roll, a small one.
And does it come very even?
Yes, it comes very even.
With just
So-
the order?
Yes,
Okay.
I roll it on, and then I take the other sheet and roll it over. I always roll the paper over and don't I think some people use some board to press it down or something, but I really use some kind of roll the paper on, and then roll it onto the other paper. I usually work on a glass surface. The roll is just a cardboard roll. No, it doesn't stick because it doesn't come into contact with the glue. The paper is rolled over it, so only the paper attaches to the glue. No, it's just a very, very thin layer. I don't wet the paper. I just apply a thin coating of the glue, and then I apply the paper and press it down evenly while applying.
Maybe up to David now.
So about Yoshizawa and the back coating procedure.
No.
So I had first-hand experience of this. So I don't believe Yoshizawa did invent the process. And the reason is this. So the first time I went to Japan was in 1980, and I visited Yoshizawa after buttering up, trying to smooth over the cracks. A difficult man to deal with, I'm sure some of you will have realised. But anyway, so I had a couple of days at his house, and one of those was he actually showed me his technique for doing this, what we call back coating. the technique is, I don't believe it's his, because I found a Japanese bookbinding, it's actually an English book, but it explains how the Japanese bind their books. And an exactly similar process is described in this book. And in fact, if you're a Yoshizawa supporter or if you like, disciple as I am, I think, I've got all his books, I think, and there's one of the later books is a paperback with a sort of brown cover, and there are some images of him going through the same process that he taught me. And the method that I recall, it's a long time ago, and I did try it a couple of times, but it's a bit of a performance, frankly. So you make a simple flour paste, and you boil up flour with water and get it to a certain consistency. And then you have 2 sheets of paper, and I don't remember which one they can be of unequal thickness. And one is slightly bigger than the other, and I don't remember which is which. But then you apply the paste to one of these sheets, and you then very, very carefully smooth the other one on top of it, as accurately as you can, and then by this time it's quite damp. I think you spray it with a spray bottle or something, and then his technique was to stick it to a wooden board with a tiny tab at one corner, and the way you stuck it, you ran a thin line of glue all around the edge of the double sheet of the sheet, and then you put a small tab, and there's a very sound reason for that, because if you don't, you won't get it off the board, and you leave it there for as long as possible, overnight at least. And when it's fully dry, you put something in where the tab is, and carefully slide down to remove it from the board.
And does he use anything to make it flat? To keep both of them flat?
Because as it dries out, it's going to contract a little bit.
Okay.
And so it's very taut. If you didn't glue it down, then it would be a sort of buckled mess. The whole point is gluing it to the board with a thin line of glue all the way around the edge, is so that it becomes very stiff and firm, and then you prise it away from the board and you're ready to go, to fold it. And I subsequently, after my visit, I was sent some photographs taken by Mrs. Yoshizawa, and there were English titles very neatly written out. It said, Mr. Brill studying Ora-uchi. Ora-uchi is the name of the technique that they use. So I was taught by the master, not that I'd ever really very much put it into clay, but it's uncomfortable about CMC personally.
Okay. Andre, behind you?
I have another approach to gluing sheets together, as usual. I prepared one exhibition and I needed, 10 Kawatas yards with, we used standard paper and covered it with paper which looks like wool. But we was in a hurry and we cannot wait for gluing so many sheets together, so we just put the wool sheet on the standard paper and fold it.
No, I didn't understand. Again? Can you repeat, please?
We just put wool paper on standard paper and fold it.
Without any glue?
Yes.
Okay. Does it work?
Of course.
You just fold 2 sheets of paper together?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to be trying to keep us on schedule, by the way. So I want to say we're going to. I want to book some time talking about both tissue paper, like for bugs, really thin, and then also foil, glued to foil. Maybe I can kick off the foil. I had heard, and I think it was from, I'm forgetting her name right now, but wallpaper paste was a successful, and that's what I've been using. I dilute the wallpaper paste, I think I dilute it by like maybe 4 wallpaper paste, 1 water, 5 1, like very, very little amount of water. That's what I've been finding. And I have one success. Okay, because when you do this with tissue, there's this like classic, like the tissue color fades. Like I don't know if y'all experienced that. Like it becomes ugly after 6 months. I have one success story, and it's when I folded the Origamizer Stanford Bunny, I used, number one, if you go to a bodega in New York City where there's like, they sell like cheap versions of everything, you get cheap foil, and it's like really thin. Okay, so like, and that's like to your advantage. Okay, so get some cheap bodega foil, and then I covered it in white paper, and it was this, I can't remember what it was, but it felt kind of like a little cottony. But that was like the one time that I made foil paper that just was like a total winner, total success.
So do you have any experience with gluing anything to foil? Yes. Where is the speaker? The mic, sorry.
Oh, it's over here.
Okay.
Yeah, depending on the paper, if I'm doing something on the thicker side to foil, because the paper I want to use is soft, I'll just use a commercial spray mount. And that's actually very quick and easy. You just kind of start centering, rub it flat to the edges.
Can you say which?
That,
Yes.
That's
Okay.
Okay.
But you can't use it on like really thin stuff like tissue paper. But you got like a big, nice thick piece of paper, but it's too soft. It's perfect.
But then it's quite messy to use this one.
Well, no,
You cannot do it inside your house because the spray goes all around, and then your wife will be quite annoyed.
I'll put it on the table, I'll spread newspapers out over the whole table, I'll put the foil down, spray it, put the piece of, good paper on that's going to be outside the model.
This could happen only if your wife also likes origami. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Can we get
Matthew?
Matthew have something on that?
Can I just squeeze in for a moment?
Yeah.
Because I want to say about the...
We finished the 15 minutes.
Oh.
But go ahead.
The spray glue. If you use spray glue for tissue foil, the tissue foil will have more foil qualities. It will be hard to reverse, it will be very soft, but it will be easy to shape. Whereas if you use a white glue, like PVA glue, diluted down, it will have more of the properties will be better, come out better.
Can you use white glue with foil?
Yes, of course you can.
Okay, I never tried that.
I used the brand Metulan Overlit Tea.
How do you spell that?
Metulan. With Y.
Metal.
L-A-N. N. No, there's no H. N. No. Yes. Okay. Overlit tea.
What?
Overlit. O. Yes. And a T. No, the T is separate. No, overlit tea.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. That was hard.
We'll complete this later. Don't worry about that.
Patient with me.
Okay, Matthew, please.
Yeah, I just want to side with Ilan on the spray adhesive issue. It can be really, really messy. I mean, it works, but like I did it once in an apartment that I was renting, and the landlord had a cat, and the cat wandered through the apartment freely and left hair everywhere. And so I used this, and then I walked around the apartment and realized later I had been barefoot, and the entire bottoms of my feet were all covered in cat hair that stuck to the bottom of my feet. So yeah, I stopped using spray glue.
Okay, we move on.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on like bugs before we go on, but gluing thin. Does anybody have any advice? Anything they feel like they need to share about gluing thin paper to other thin paper?
So what I do with thin papers.
Mike's right behind you.
Okay. Can I just add something with foil just before we go on to another subject?
Please, quickly.
I just want to mention that also the type of foil that you use has an impact on what glue you can use. I personally use a foil that's called, I don't know why, but it's called heavy duty foil. And whenever I try to glue using PVA, it doesn't stick on it at all. So I use spray glue, and it's thicker foil, but to me it feels much better to fold.
Okay.
Even if it's thicker.
Thanks.
So the foil also has an impact on what you want to fold.
That's good.
Here.
So what I do if I want to just glue two thin tissues together, I don't use glue sheet. I just put both sheets together on a glass table, and then I apply the glue on top. And because it soaks through, I don't have any problems with applying. So it's just put them on together on a glass sheet, and then apply the glue.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's great.
But that only works with bleeding tissue paper, for example, and not so good with the non-bleeding ones, because they often have some kind of layer that prevents the glue from soaking through.
Okay, thank you.
And also, I just saw, because above you mentioned plexiglass versus glass.
Yes.
And so I have better experience with glass, because when I do it like this and apply the glue, it sticks on the glass, and I just leave it on the glass to dry. With plexiglass, I had the issue that sometimes it peels off. It just doesn't stick so well, because I basically glue my paper onto the glass and then I remove it. And
when you remove it, it just go off like this?
Yeah, I just can pull it off slowly and it goes off.
On the glass.
On the glass. But
right.
With plexiglass, I had the experience that it peels off while it's drying.
I had the intuition that plexiglass was working for MC, and that they were quite similar behavior when it comes to MC.
I'm using MC and I have...
Oh, you are using MC.
I'm
okay,
using
okay, yeah. So maybe glasses may be better, yeah. Okay, we should move on to reinforcing. And
yes, go ahead.
This is simply coding is beginning. This is I would be happy if you led this one, if you wanted to lead this one too. But we'll begin with like coding, which is just coding.
So I would like to ask João how he made the model that I have at home stand so firmly. So the question now is, unlike gluing when you attach two papers one to each other to have another kind of paper, how do you make your model stand out for many years? From maybe 2 points of view. One is to make sure that they stand and then they don't lose their color or they don't lose their appearance in a way. So maybe you can start and tell us, because I have this empty angel at my house and it stands there beautiful but also very stiff and very... Where's the microphone?
So I have no problem using glue to help me to reinforce the thin features from the model, but I also use some wire inside.
Okay.
Structure that when I fold the model, I have the base, and I start to thinner the points with some water and a little bit of white glue. I don't know, it's PVI, and start to shape. And when it dries, it will stay firmly and stays like a stick. So you can shape it then with the wire inside. You can shape it however you want.
So it's kind of wet folding with glue? Is that what you're saying?
More or less.
Okay.
Because white glue has this property that when it dries, it makes the paper to...
So can you just say how much water and how much glue you use?
It depends.
Of course.
If you want it very firmly, you use a very small quantity of water. If you want it to shape it a little more, you use plenty of water and less glue. It depends of what you want to do.
Okay. So you do it during the folding?
Yes.
Okay. What other advice do you have for making sure that the model will stand? Any other one? Only João? Oh,
two obvious ones, maybe. Wireframe. You embed a metallic wire in the model.
Okay.
Definitely not my invention, but works wonders. And I also use textile hardener.
Textile hardener.
Yeah.
Textile?
So, yes. So either when I do fold with literally textile, then I first apply the textile hardener, wait for it to be dry to the touch, and then
You were
fold that.
saying you are folding with textile?
Yes.
Only
But-
textile or paper with textile?
Well, both.
Can we see?
The few models that I've got up here?
Okay.
There are textile and textile with paper in the back, or just paper. But there's only 5 models. You're free to touch them if you've got clean hands. So, but you can also use the textile hardener on paper itself.
Do you have a certain brand that you use?
I do have one, but I need to look it up.
Okay.
Which
so
is it's written in my book.
Ah.
Which you can freely examine. That's that.
Is it me?
I don't know if
I just don't remember the brand name right now.
Okay. Yes, Robert.
It's more like a paint, really. It feels like a paint.
So first I wanted to thank Dave for correcting my sloppiness. I didn't think he invented back coating. I thought he had introduced it to origami. But I don't, he never said to me, I did that, so. Yes. But that technique is a way of making things stand and last.
Okay.
I've recently got to some of his work that he had folded years ago for a temporary display, and so could examine it up close. And the pieces were rock hard, and they had been made by this back coating technique. So when the paper's damp, as like Dave was describing, you can fold it, but then when it dries, it becomes very, very rigid. And those pieces Yoshizawa had folded decades before, but they still were in good shape.
You're saying one of the reasons to make a sandwich of paper is to make a very strong paper.
Yeah, and
Okay.
a very rigid.
Very rigid results.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
As well as giving the qualities of wet folding. So the cross-fertilization is that the damp paper, because when you start to fold this back-coated paper, you have to do it wet. So you've got the best of both worlds. You've got the soft creases that wet folding will give you, and the rigidity when it dries off.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question just to finish. When you apply the cables, or how did you say, David, the wireframe, how do you make sure it's standard? It doesn't move aside, or do you glue it to the paper, or just put it inside and fold around it?
That will depend on the model. Basically, you try to have the base already in shape, then you unfold a little bit, and then you wrap the base around the wireframe.
Okay.
Should I mention my book again?
Okay.
But
can you tell us about your book?
Yes, but not now.
Okay, okay.
But I'm pretty sure that's the sort of technique that Bernie is also using for his constructions.
Does anyone here have some experience with a larger scale?
Well,
okay.
Yes, Robert would.
Yeah. Ah, okay. First, let's Roman.
Yeah, I have a different method again. I haven't tried it only once very recently, and I have very little experience in this whole area. But I know that Joel Cooper uses shellac to coat his.
What is this?
Yeah,
oh,
that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's usually used in woodworking to.
It's a resin. Okay.
Ah, okay. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I just put a very slim layer of this on top of a 3D tessellation, just one layer.
Before
of
or after?
After folding. From behind, but
yeah, okay.
For now, it doesn't look very nice because of the color, but I think there's also nicer colors and stuff. I just wanted to say that it gets really rigid and like it feels like plastic, and it really holds the angle well. And yeah.
There's,
okay. Yeah.
Maybe need to move on if there's one last, if anybody needs to get something out. Oh, okay.
Andre?
One.
Very quickly, I used for one big model just wooden frame.
Wooden frame.
Yeah.
You just built a wooden frame.
Yeah, yeah. It was wooden frame, and the model was just put it on.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We move on.
Yes. Okay. Coloring. I'm excited about this one. Okay. How do you paint paper? Okay. Some of the thoughts. If I could pose like the most challenging case that I've run into, it is watercolor paper. I love folding watercolor paper. I love wet folding watercolor paper, but I want it to be not white. How do I color one side of it, especially for the models where I leave the other side white, and then wet fold it, but not have the ink come out again on my fingers and getting onto the white? And okay, so we can get started.
Yeah, Lee, start, please. He was so enthusiastic about his hand. It's like he touched the roof.
Okay. I don't have the problem of the color coming off at all. I use acrylic ink. I have tried other paints and acrylic, but acrylic ink gives me a really smooth finish. So I get the ink either neat or with a little bit of water, and I get a sponge because that gives me the cleanest finish.
Do you wet the paper before?
It depends, because I might want a different paint effect. Yeah, because if I wet the paper, the ink will spread more and give me a different pattern. Yeah, so the ray in my exhibition that you see, I wet that paper because I wanted an uneven coloration for the surface. But I might want a very pure color, then I would not wet it first. But if it's on, say, Archie's paper, the Archie's is really heavily sized. Yeah, the gelatin size in the paper is very strong, and it will absorb the ink. So and the ink dries and it is waterproof. But when you wet the paper, the water can still penetrate. So even though the gelatin size comes off, as Robert says, my hands get sticky when I fold Arches. Yeah, the ink stays, and I don't have any problem with bleeding or anything.
What brand do you use?
I use a few. I'd need to look up.
Okay, so just tell us later. We'll put it in the paper.
Liquitex is on. You can buy it on Amazon in the UK, and it's a good brand, good colours. There are others. The only thing I found is any coating, even on really heavy paper, it changes the paper a little, and sometimes that's good for your model. And sometimes you've made it a bit too soft, or you've changed the feeling, so you have to almost relearn to fold the model.
That's wonderful.
Okay. Jonathan?
I also paint arch paper on one side with acrylic painting, and it's funny when you wet fold the paper after it make like savon. How do you say savon? Soap. It make like soap on the black side. I usually use black paint. And one little tip: I buy very large sheets of art paper, 50 by 70 centimeters, and I paint them, and after I cut them, so I conserve the white line on the edges of the paper. I don't use soap. It's when I put water, it seems like it's soap, but it's.
These
okay,
are all
Anna?
great. Yep, keep passing, and I'll seed with another question or another difficulty when you glue two sheets of paper or affix two sheets of paper and one of them is black and one of them is white. How do you keep them from bleeding? Or dark and white?
Okay.
Okay, so these are two different things.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the coloring first.
Mhm.
I use an airbrush system to color my papers and have very, very good experiences with it because you can apply such a thin layer of paint that it doesn't even penetrate the thinnest paper. I used very, very thin. It's almost thinner than tissue paper, Japanese calligraphy paper. And the airbrush, you can use different inks for it. I have acrylic-based ones, and they don't bleed onto the fingers. I also used other paints that bleed. When I do this, I use spray coating afterwards to make them stick better so they don't get onto my fingers. But I prefer to take colors that are true to the color, that stay good for over years, artist colors, right? You can get a lot of different colors for the airbrush system, and the real positive thing is that you get this very, very thin layer, and it's even, you can also use the airbrush to paint your models afterwards, so you don't only have the advantage of painting it before and having two different colors on both sides of the paper, even with the thinnest paper, but you can also take your finished model and paint it afterwards, like many people do with the miniature 3D printed models. You can apply the same techniques for the origami models.
So you paint with an airbrush a model which is already folded?
I can do that, yes.
And that it sometimes, if you do it, then the overlapping layers, they have like, you see it, that you can, that it was painted after it was folded.
You can take masking tape to cover parts if you are unsure where you spray, but you can have really, really fine sprays with the airbrush. You can go from really, really fine lines and dots up to big areas.
Okay.
Everything's possible, so this is very versatile and really perfect for origami.
So next convention you will give a workshop about that.
Yes, I wanted at the last one, but I wasn't allowed to use any paints in the classrooms.
Okay.
So I actually had an airbrush system with me on the last CFC.
Okay.
What about? Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't know if it was buzzing. Sorry. I didn't know if it was buzzing or not. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
We have to move kind of fast, but we've got inks. We got ink mentioned, and then what did you say you were using acrylic ink or acrylic paint? Acrylic paint.
Yeah,
okay. And then airbrush. Was there any other just types of coloring out there? Kind of like shout them out if you, or quick answers is what I mean.
I tried once actually in the lab, like using staining, like cell staining. It was a boring week, so we did everything you can stain cells with. It is in the lab. They have a Western blot paper. In general, it's a watercolor paper. They're huge sheets, and a fun thing is it's actually one for the fail section because they don't really fade out over time, the color or the ink, but they change color a bit because they oxidize over time. So it was a fun art project. All is coffee.
Coffee.
I love to stain paper with coffee. It smells even good for a month.
I've done that before. Yeah, it's a nice effect.
Yes, please.
Just a little thing.
Painted foil paper on the paper side with watercolor, and obviously you can't, get it wet later because it would make a mess. But once it dries, you can fold it. It looks really nice.
Painting foil.
Yeah, two little tips. The first one, when I paint my paper, black on one side is black and the other side is white, and I want to travel with these sheets of paper, I used to keep them alternatively packed. so that the white is with the white and the black is with the white. Black.
With the black, yeah.
Understand?
Good.
And also, I tried, because it's impossible to put acrylic on both sides, so water cannot enter. If I want, for example, yellow and black, if the paper is white, it's impossible. But I tried once it's possible to just paint one side, and after folding, you put maybe aquarelle painting to change the color of the white side.
Okay, painting after folding.
Do you have any more subjects?
There is the brushed, this one, the brushed paint look, like Eric Chassel's.
Yes. Can you show the image?
Oh yeah, so we pulled up Cade Chan's piece. Oh,
first, who knows how you say the name? Is it Kade Chan or is it Cade Chan or is it Cade? Are you sure? I'm 90% sure that's what 90% is good enough. Cade Chan or Chan? Chan.
Yes.
Okay. So I would like to know how is he doing this effect. Who can help me?
Well, here. I don't know.
Well, I had a comment on the preceding topic, but.
Oh, James. I didn't see you, sorry. Hi.
So just to add really quickly to other ways of coloring models, I've started experimenting using various natural dyes. I've made my own walnut ink, pokeberry ink. The challenge is that they fade. And so one trick that you have to mess with is either adjusting the pH of the dye and selecting the proper kind of binding agent to ensure that the dye sticks to the fibers of the paper.
Is this where I've heard people using citric acid when they boil their 3D prints?
Yeah, so citric acid often will work if you're using like cherry-based or plum-based juices, and that can change the juice from a burgundy to like a bright scarlet. And if you wanted to add, convert it to a basic dye, you can get a really nice like deep ocean green or blue-green color.
Are you going to speak about that in your talk?
Well, that's for next CFC, right?
Yeah, probably.
But there are various dyes that are available. A good supplier is a place in Canada called Maiwa, M-A-I-W-A. You can get things like logwood. Logwood is a really nice purple dye from a Mexican tree.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, back to this.
Oh, yeah.
Ah, it's not. Oh, back to this, yes.
Okay,
Anna?
here. Over here.
David?
One way of doing this, of achieving such an effect, is to use dry brushing. Dry brushing is essentially a technique in which you load a brush with as much paint as you can and then empty it as much as you can as well, so that it feels very dry.
Okay.
And that if you swipe it over, say, a white sheet, you will not see any traces. Once the brush is unloaded, you can pass it quickly over the model or over miniatures, which is where the technique is actually most used, I think. And whatever tiny little bits of paints are left in the brush will attach basically to the edges of the model. And that's
Will it go against the folds or with the folds?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter. And it will really always attach systematically, preferably to the edge. But you have to be patient and unload the brush, otherwise you will just basically paint the whole model.
Okay. Yes, Matthew? Is it in your book? Of course.
Cade actually has a video on YouTube where he explains exactly how he does it. So if anyone wants to learn how to do his effect, he has a tutorial.
Wonderful.
Does anybody have any?
Yeah, Anna?
Oh, yeah. And also, I have Eric Schwassel's piece up right here. If anybody has any input on any tricks that he was doing as well.
Another possibility to do this is to use cotton swabs or yeah, on the sticks, the one you would use for the ears.
Yeah.
Or there are also paint brushes that have a little sponge on the top that you can use to evenly distribute the color. And apart from the usual paints, there's also wax pastes that have a similar effect with the gold shine that you can use for something like this. They behave very differently to usual colors, but those wax pastes have a very nice shine and golden color.
I think, yeah.
Okay. Any last remarks?
Maybe
Because
one last, because this. And
Tasha?
then we'll have to last one, and then we'll break because it's running up against time.
I just wanted to say I'm working on jewelry sometimes, and I'm using metallized paper, which has this horrible quality that when you fold, sometimes the edge or the folding edge, the color went away. But you can turn it in your advantage in similar way as here. For example, as I noticed that this is what is happening, I started to remove those edges with my nail, just to remove colors from the edges, so to enhance the features of the model. So sometimes it's like when you remove the color from the edges, you will get similar effect.
Yeah. Is it in the Book of David?
No.
No? Okay. Just asking. Okay, we have the next talk is via Skype, and they need a bit of time to organize. So we have to cut this very, very interesting.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you all so much. That was amazing to hear everybody's input. Thank you.
James, did you send the form? We would like to help a friend who is doing a research about. Can you say a few words just before we finish?
Oh yeah. So I'm doing a survey to try and get a sense of why origami artists use the paper that we do, and that kind of has been a recurring theme over the course of CFC this whole weekend. And I'm collecting data to get a sense of like the different qualities that you all select, whether it's color, texture, and then a little bit of demographic background to see if there are any patterns or trends in different schools of thought, whether you're in Europe or North America or Japan. To see if there are patterns in why you select certain species and certain types of paper and what kinds of things that you fold. So we'll see a little bit of that in my talk tomorrow. If you're able to fill that out by sometime tonight, I'd really appreciate it.
We send a link to a form in Google Form. It has how many questions?
I don't know, maybe like 13 or so, 16, something like that.
So it's no more than 3 minutes and you finish to answer. I answered it maybe a year ago. It's not a hard work, and if you won't do it, I won't see you in the CFC list. So
some of the questions you might not be familiar with. Some of the questions you might not be familiar with, but just please do your best to answer to the best of your ability. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so thank you all again. Soon we are going to have a talk via Skype by Andres Sanchez. I hope I said his name correctly. Double fold, an application to compare, and he's from Colombia. An application to compare origami crease patterns, and Gerwin is going to make a workshop or an open discussion about how to take the best images of origami models. We will send you all the text that Robby collected during the